told you that having a massive amount of willpower is actually the main reason you keep failing at your goals?
I mean, it sounds completely backwards, right? It goes against literally everything we're taught.
Exactly. We've been sold this, like, cultural myth that if you just want something badly enough, whether it's getting into shape or, saving a failing marriage, you can just white-knuckle your way to success.
Yeah, but the cognitive psychology data suggests the exact opposite. Relying on sheer willpower is basically a recipe for disaster.
Welcome to today's deep dive, where we're looking at a fascinating stack of sources that turns everything we know about motivation completely upside down.
It really does. We've got this amazing blend of research on the intention-behavior gap, the underlying mechanics of implementation intentions, and some really profound academic studies on the self-expansion model of relationships.
It's just such a cool synthesis of ideas. We're looking at how the brain actually forms long-term habits and how those exact same cognitive mechanisms apply to human connection.
Right, because the hardware in our heads is the same, whether you're trying to eat more vegetables or trying to fall back in love with your partner.
Totally. So our mission for you today is to hand over a foolproof, highly practical if-then framework. By the end of this deep dive, you'll know how to simultaneously build better habits, maintain unbreakable consistency, and breathe totally new life into your long-term relationships without relying on that, exhaustion-inducing willpower.
Which is going to save you a ton of mental energy.
Okay, let's unpack this. Why is it that having a massive amount of motivation to improve our lives so frequently ends in just, well, absolute failure?
What's really fascinating here is just how bleak the numbers are when it comes to human motivation. In the cognitive psychology research, this disconnect is called the intention-behavior gap.
The intention-behavior gap. Okay, so what does that actually look like in the data?
Well, studies consistently show that general goal intentions, so like you telling yourself, I intend to eat healthier starting Monday, or even I intend to remain faithful to my partner, those intentions only account for about 28% of the variance in actual behavior.
Wait, hold on. 28%?
Yeah.
That means almost 3/4 of what we actually end up doing day to day has absolutely nothing to do with our grand, overarching intention.
That is the sobering reality, yeah. And when researchers look specifically at health behaviors, people successfully translate their good intentions into action, only 53% of the time.
Wow. So it is literally a coin toss whether you will do the thing you deeply, genuinely want to do?
Exactly, a coin toss.
Yeah.
And that failure rate comes down to two primary categories of psychological barriers that just create friction in the brain. The first category is simply the friction of failing to get started.
Which, I mean, you'd assume is the easiest part. You just take the first step.
You would think so, but the brain is incredibly skilled at avoiding that first step. Failing to start includes everyday memory failures, like simply forgetting to take a daily vitamin because the environmental cue wasn't strong enough.
Ooh, guilty of that one for sure.
Right. And it also includes missing opportunities, like putting off scheduling a medical screening, even when you know you need one, just because the administrative friction of making a phone call feels too high in the moment.
Yeah, the classic, I'll just do it tomorrow trap.
Exactly. And the most common barrier in this failing to start category is having second thoughts at the critical moment.
Let me guess. You plan to eat a healthy salad for lunch, you walk into the cafeteria, and you're immediately hit with the smell of, like, a highly aromatic curry or a fresh pizza.
And in that exact critical moment, the intention just evaporates. The immediate sensory input completely overwhelms the long-term abstract goal.
Okay, so that's the failure to launch. What's the second category of psychological barriers?
Getting derailed. This is when you actually manage to start the habit, but you get knocked off course by your own environment. This happens when we spontaneously attend to distracting stimuli.
Like getting sidetracked by something shiny.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Think of a person trying to quit smoking. They're doing well until they see an old photograph of themselves smoking, or they watch a movie character light up, and that visual stimulus just derails the cognitive effort.
Okay.
Getting derailed also involves falling prey to deeply ingrained bad habits that run on autopilot.
Right, like if I set an intention to start wearing daily sunscreen, but my deeply ingrained morning routine is to just grab my keys and walk out the door to work in the yard.
Exactly. The old neural pathway is a superhighway, and the new intention is just a dirt path.
And the superhighway wins every time.
Every single time. And the final derailment barrier is succumbing to negative self-states. When we experience distress, anxiety, or even just a bad mood, the brain actively prioritizes short-term mood repair over long-term goals.
Because if you feel bad, Eating junk food offers an immediate dopamine hit. Your brain hijacks your diet because it wants immediate chemical solace.
You nailed it. It's an emotional override.
But let me push back slightly here because this brings us back to the willpower myth. If someone is truly committed to a goal, like if they are deeply emotionally invested in losing weight or staying faithful, why isn't that profound commitment enough in the critical moment? Why does the curry or the old habit win if the desire is strong?
It's a great question. If we connect this to the bigger picture of how the brain operates, it basically comes down to cognitive depletion.
Meaning our brains just get tired.
Yeah, exactly. Conscious deliberation, which is what you're doing when you weigh the pros and cons in the moment, or when you try to summon the willpower to walk past the pizza. That takes a tremendous amount of metabolic energy in the prefrontal cortex.
So it's literally draining fuel.
Right. When you're tired, stressed, or just going about a busy Tuesday, your brain literally does not have the glucose or the bandwidth to constantly reevaluate your long-term commitments. Willpower is a finite resource.
So by relying on it to make the right choice at the exact moment of temptation, you are forcing an exhausted brain to do heavy lifting.
Precisely. You're setting yourself up to fail.
Well, here's where it gets really interesting, because the solution to this problem feels a lot like writing lines of computer code for the human brain. We can program the brain to bypass the prefrontal cortex entirely.
It is a brilliant mechanism. The framework comes from cognitive psychology research on what's called implementation intentions. Instead of forming a vague goal intention, which requires that heavy lifting in the moment, you create a highly specific contingent plan.
So instead of the vague intention, I want to exercise more, what is the actual code we're writing here?
The syntax is critical. It must take the format. If critical situation Y occurs, then I will initiate goal-directed response Z. You're pre-deciding the exact when, where, and how.
Break down the actual cognitive mechanism for us. Why does writing a simple if-then statement bypass that willpower depletion? Like, how does a sentence change the brain's processing?
Well, by explicitly linking a specific situational cue to a specific response, the mental representation of that cue becomes highly accessible in your memory. You're priming your subconscious to scan the environment for the if.
Okay, I'm with you.
When the if happens in real life, the then triggers automatically, relying on the basal ganglia, which is the habit center of the brain, rather than the prefrontal cortex. It's a neurological shortcut called strategic automaticity.
Strategic automaticity. So the conscious brain gets to just step out of the room. There is no hesitation, no moral deliberation, no weighing the pros and cons. The code just executes.
Exactly. And the results of this are staggering. One of the studies in our sources looked at women who had a goal to perform a breast self-exam over the next month.
Okay.
Of the women who only had the goal intention, meaning they had the high motivation to do it, only 53% actually followed through.
There's that coin toss again.
Right. But the researchers took another group of women and instructed them to create a specific if-then implementation intention. They mapped out exactly when and where they would do it. 100% of those women performed the exam.
Wait, 100%. In psychological research, finding a 100% compliance rate on an independent behavior is like almost unheard of.
It really is. And it's because the initiation of the action was entirely automated. It didn't require them to remember or to summon willpower. The environmental cue did all the work for them.
That is wild.
And the strategic automaticity doesn't just help you start a behavior. It is vital for maintaining it through a process called goal shielding.
Goal shielding. I read the study on this in our sources, and it really feels like installing a network firewall in your brain.
That is the perfect analogy. Just like a firewall automatically diverts malicious traffic before it reaches the main server, implementation intentions actively protect your ongoing goal striving. They neutralize unwanted thoughts and feelings before they even reach your conscious awareness.
So if I'm, say, a tennis player in a high-stakes match, and my brain starts throwing distracting thoughts at me about losing, how does the firewall actually work?
The tennis players in the studies used if-then plans, like, if I start to doubt my swing, then I will immediately focus on the seams of the ball.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, by pre-programming that response, the distracting thought is neutralized instantly.
Mm-hmm.
The brain doesn't have time to spiral into anxiety because the then behavior has already been triggered. People use the exact same firewall technique to shield themselves from cravings for junk food, too.
But I can imagine someone listening right now writing down an if-then plan and still failing. The code has to be written perfectly, right? Walk us through how to overcome common failures when executing these specific plans.
You're totally right. The number one reason implementation intentions fail is a lack of precision. You cannot write, if it is tomorrow, then I will exercise.
Because tomorrow is too vague.
Exactly. Tomorrow is not a cue your brain can scan for. It requires too much deliberation to figure out when tomorrow actually happens. The plan must be highly precise, like if it is 5:00 p.m. on Monday, then I will jog home from work.
The cue has to be unmistakable.
Yes. Secondly, the plan must be viable. You have to actually encounter the situation you're planning for. It also must be instrumental, meaning the then action genuinely moves you toward the goal.
Right, it has to be useful.
And critically, and researchers have confirmed this over and over, you must specifically word it in that conditional if-then format. Changing the syntax to just, I will jog home from work at 5:00 p.m. dramatically reduces its effectiveness.
Because it doesn't create the same neurological link between cue and response.
Exactly. You literally have to type the code in correctly.
Okay, but there is a really fascinating limitation to this mental programming that the researchers discovered, and it has to do with perfectionism.
Yeah, this raises an important question about individual psychology.
Yeah.
The research shows that for people who score high in socially prescribed perfectionism,
Which means what exactly?
those are individuals who feel intense, crushing pressure from others to be flawless. For them, implementation intentions can actually have a negative effect on their performance.
So the if-then plan actually backfires? Why?
Well, for those specific individuals, the rigid, inflexible structure of an if-then plan amplifies their anxiety. It feels like yet another strict rule they're being judged on.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, the cognitive pressure overrides the automaticity, causing them to perform worse than if they just had a vague goal.
So if you are someone who feels intensely judged by the world, this rigid programming might not be for you. But for the vast majority of people, this is the ultimate hack for bypassing cognitive depletion.
Without a doubt.
Which brings us to the second half of our mission today. We know how to program habits. But how do we apply this rigid cognitive framework to something as unpredictable, messy, and deeply emotional as romantic love?
To understand how to protect love, we first have to understand the mechanisms of why it fades. And that brings us to the profound academic work on the self-expansion model.
This model completely changed how I view relationships. The core idea is that human beings have a primary evolutionary motivation to constantly expand themselves, right? We have this innate drive to increase our cognitive complexity, our identity, our physical skills, and just our overall potential efficacy in the world.
We are fundamentally driven to grow, and we rapidly achieve this expansion through close relationships in a process that researchers call the inclusion of other in the self.
Inclusion of other in the self. Walk us through the actual mechanics of that.
Sure. When you become romantically close to someone, your brain literally begins to incorporate that partner's unique resources, their perspectives, their quirky hobbies, and their worldviews into your own self-concept.
You're basically absorbing their universe into yours.
Exactly.
So if my new partner is, say, an expert rock climber who loves 19th century literature, I suddenly feel like a more capable, complex person because those traits are now accessible to me through them.
That's it exactly. And in the early days of a romantic relationship, this inclusion happens at a staggering speed. You are constantly discovering new things about them and, by extension, expanding yourself.
Right, because everything is new.
And this rapid early expansion drives a massive continuous surge of dopamine in the brain's reward centers. That dopamine rush, that physiological high, that is the biological reality of what we call falling in love.
It is intoxicating because you are quite literally growing at warp speed. But there's a catch, right? Eventually, you learn all their stories. You know their quirks. You know exactly what they're going to order at the restaurant.
Yeah, you hit the plateau. Over time, once the partner is successfully and fully included in your self-concept, the rate of expansion naturally slows down.
Because there's less new territory to map.
Consequently, the dopamine surge stops, the intense excitement fades, and you're just left with routine. This is the physiological root of long-term relational boredom.
I should note, the sources highlight that this isn't exclusively about romance either. Perceived opportunities for self-expansion also strongly predict feelings of closeness and intimacy in friendships. We are drawn to friends who challenge us and help us grow.
Absolutely, it applies across the board.
But focusing back on romantic relationships, this raises a really challenging question. If the intoxicating feeling of falling in love is just the dopamine of rapid self-expansion, and we inevitably run out of new things to discover about our long-term partner, is long-term relational boredom scientifically inevitable?
It's a sobering thought, but the research resoundingly says no. Boredom is not inevitable. But avoiding it requires intentional cognitive effort. To combat relational decay, you cannot just sit back and hope the spark returns.
Right.
You have to actively engage in novel and challenging activities with your partner.
So how did these self-expansion principles actually strengthen long-term romantic bonds? Like, what is happening in the brain when we do that?
You're essentially tricking your brain's reward system. By tackling a novel challenge together, you are forcing yourself into a state of rapid self-expansion, growing your skills or knowledge. Because you are doing it in the physical presence of your partner, your brain maps that exciting growth and that fresh dopamine surge directly onto the relationship
Oh,
itself.
wow.
You reassociate your partner with the feeling of expansion, which massively increases relationship closeness and quality.
So we need methods to actively include a partner in self-expansion to manufacture the dopamine that used to just happen naturally. And the sources provide three very specific examples of how couples can do this. I'll guess the first one has to be highly physical to get the heart rate up.
You're spot on. The first example is physical challenges. Studies have tested this by having couples complete physical obstacle courses together, often while tied together or navigating unfamiliar terrain.
Okay, yeah.
The physical exertion causes physiological arousal, and the novelty of navigating it as a single unit creates a powerful bonding effect.
Okay, obstacle courses make sense. Adrenaline translates to attraction. What is the second method?
The second involves silly or highly cooperative physical tasks. In one really fascinating study, couples were given the frustrating challenge of carrying objects across a room together while both holding on to the exact same set of chopsticks.
That sounds absolutely infuriating. I can imagine the communication breaking down immediately.
Which is exactly the point. It forces immense communication and intense cooperation. More importantly, the sheer awkwardness of the task usually induces uncontrollable laughter.
Ah, I see.
Shared laughter is a phenomenal binder that neutralizes frustration and deeply associates the partner with positive effect.
I love that. And the third example doesn't require physical exertion at all, right?
Correct. The third method involves mental challenges. This could be as simple as engaging in complex cognitive tasks together, like reading novel, mind-expanding facts to each other, or trying to solve highly difficult anagrams or puzzles as a team.
But wait, if sitting on the couch doing anagrams works, does this mean couples don't need to constantly seek out extreme adrenaline rushes? Like, I don't need to go skydiving every weekend to save my marriage.
That is a very common misconception. While physiological arousal from an obstacle course helps, it isn't strictly necessary. Researchers studied this and found that the absolute key is finding an optimal challenge level.
Like the Goldilocks zone of activities. Not too easy, not too hard.
Precisely. Couples experience the highest relationship satisfaction when they tackle a task that is moderately challenging, but that they actually possess the skills to complete. When you hit that sweet spot together, it creates a shared flow state.
A flow state.
Yeah, you're both completely absorbed in overcoming the obstacle as a unit, generating immense positive affect.
And the benefits of this are profound. The sources mention a 21-day diary study which found that engaging in this kind of self-expansion doesn't just predict relationship satisfaction. It strongly predicts significantly greater sexual desire.
Because novel activities spark the flow state. The flow state sparks positive affect, and suddenly the brain remembers why it finds this person so captivating. You are actively taking the wheel of the relationship's neurochemistry instead of just being a passenger in its natural decay.
So what does this all mean? How do we take the if-then coding for habits and the self-expansion model for love and merge them into a single, cohesive strategy?
We merge the frameworks to protect and expand love on autopilot. Maintaining a long-term relationship doesn't just mean scheduling fun anagrams. It also requires cognitive self-regulation. You have to actively protect the bond against temptations, what the research calls attractive alternatives.
Because life is messy and temptations are everywhere.
Yes. And research on a concept called preemptive devaluation shows that we can automate this protection. People with lower natural inhibitory abilities, meaning individuals who know they might struggle with impulse control in the heat of the moment, can successfully use proactive if-then plans to shield their relationship goal.
Goal shielding applied to fidelity. Instead of shielding against junk food, you are shielding against relationship threats. Walk me through some real-world scenarios from the research on how to execute these specific if-then plans.
Let's look at 3 high-risk scenarios. Scenario A is professional travel. You're exhausted, you're away from home, your willpower is entirely depleted. Your if-then plan could be programmed as: if a highly attractive colleague suggests late-night drinks alone at a hotel bar, Then I will immediately decline and suggest meeting in the public dining hall for a team breakfast.
The firewall goes up, you don't have to deliberate or worry about being polite in the moment. The preloaded response just executes.
Exactly. Scenario B is digital boundary crossing, which is incredibly common today. The code is, if I feel the urge to scroll through an attractive ex-partner's social media late at night, then I will immediately close the browser and send a text to my current spouse expressing appreciation for them.
Oh, that is brilliant. You take an environmental cue that would normally lead to relationship decay and you hijack it. You pivot that exact cue into a behavior that actively reinforces relationship maintenance. What's the third scenario?
Scenario C is social disinhibition. If I am at a gathering and an attractive stranger begins overtly flirting with me, then I will immediately relocate to stand physically next to my partner.
It is so beautifully simple. You are removing the heavy lifting from your exhausted, depleted prefrontal cortex. You do not have to rely on sheer willpower to protect your most valued relationships or to build your habits if you have a pre-written script ready to fire.
It secures the foundation, allowing you to use your energy to focus on keeping the relationship novel and expanding.
So, to summarize the blueprint for you listening right now, you now possess the tools to bypass the intention behavior gap. You can use highly specific if-then syntax to shield your goals with strategic automaticity. And, the cognitive secret to preventing long-term romantic boredom, intentionally engaging in a moderately challenging shared self-expansion to keep the dopamine flowing and the bond growing.
This raises one final important question, though, and I want to leave you with a fascinating unexplored nugget from the research to mull over. Research suggests that a person's underlying psychological attachment style might actually dictate what kind of novelty works for them.
Wait, so self-expansion isn't a one-size-fits-all prescription?
Not at all. For avoidantly attached individuals, people who tend to pull away from deep intimacy, highly exciting, adrenaline-pumping novelty buffers their relationships and helps them connect.
Okay, but what about the other side?
For anxiously attached people, those who harbor deep fears of abandonment, highly novel activities can trigger stress and overwhelm. For the anxiously attached, familiar and comfortable shared activities actually do a much better job of maintaining the bond.
Wow. So here is a provocative question for you to explore on your own. Could deliberately choosing the exact right type of shared activities not only maintain your current relationship, but actively rewrite and heal your deepest childhood attachment insecurities over time?
It is a profound possibility. The specific challenges you choose to tackle with your partner today could literally reshape the neurology of how you attach to others tomorrow.
You don't have to rely on willpower to get where you want to go. You just need the right code and the willingness to keep expanding. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We warmly encourage you to take 5 minutes right now and try drafting your very first if-then plan today. See where it takes you. We'll catch you next time.